When we talk about excess weight, we often reduce the issue to a simple physical formula: eat less and move more. Yet, in reality, weight is almost never just about food or willpower. It is a complex interaction of biology, emotions, habits, and personal experiences. As a physician working at the intersection of psychology and health, I invite you to look at excess weight not as a personal failure, but as a message, a signal your body and mind are trying to send. Excess weight often forms around emotional eating. Many people turn to food not because of physical hunger, but because they feel stressed, lonely, overwhelmed, or hurt. Eating becomes a quick way to quiet difficult feelings. Childhood experiences play a powerful role as well. Being rewarded with sweets, having to finish every meal, or growing up in a household where emotions were not openly expressed. These early patterns can follow us into adulthood and shape our relationship with food. Long before we realize it, self-esteem is another deeply connected factor. For many individuals, weight becomes tied to identity and self-worth. Negative body image creates a cycle of emotional eating, guilt, self-criticism, and further overeating. Compassion, not shame, is the key to breaking this cycle. Chronic stress contributes as well. When the body is constantly under pressure, levels of cortisol rise, increasing appetite and promoting fat storage. This means that psychological tension has a direct physical effect on the body, making weight loss far more difficult than it may seem from the outside. Finally, excess weight can sometimes serve as a form of protection. It can feel like a shield that provides safety from unwanted attention or social pressure. The mind resists change when it senses that the weight has become tied to emotional security. Understanding this subconscious role is often a turning point in healing. Overcoming excess weight begins with listening to internal signals. Asking yourself whether you are truly hungry or simply overwhelmed can create space for conscious choices. Abandoning the all-or-nothing mindset also matters. Real progress comes from gradual, sustainable steps rather than strict, punishing rules. Practicing self-compassion strengthens motivation far better than self-criticism and allows you to move forward without shame. Developing new emotional skills opens the way to healthier habits. Deep breathing, journaling, a short walk, reaching out to someone you trust, or practicing mindfulness can all replace emotional eating as coping mechanisms. Supporting the body through adequate sleep and balanced routines helps regulate the stress response, making it easier to manage appetite and energy. Exploring deeper beliefs can bring surprising clarity. What do you fear about change? What might your weight be protecting you from? These questions uncover hidden patterns that no diet can reach, and when needed, working with a psychologist, psychiatrist, or physician can make the process safer and more effective. Addressing weight from both the emotional and physical sides creates the most reliable foundation for lasting change. Your weight does not define your worth, intelligence, or strength. It reflects experiences, emotions, and survival strategies that once helped you cope. The goal is not to fight your body but to understand it, listen to it, and heal it. When the mind and body begin to work together, change becomes natural, not forced. If you'd like, I can help you create a more personalized psychological strategy. Excess weight is rarely the result of one single cause. It is usually the outcome of many small, repeated choices that are tightly woven into a person's emotional life. To understand it, we need to step away from the idea of strong or weak will and instead look carefully at what happens inside a person before they reach for food, during eating, and after. Imagine a woman named Anna, 34 years old. She knows exactly which foods are healthy and which are not. She has read dozens of articles, tried several diets, and promised herself countless times that from Monday everything will be different. But every time she comes home from work exhausted, with tension in her chest, she walks straight to the kitchen, opens the fridge, and begins to eat, not because she is truly hungry, but because for a few minutes food gives her a sense of comfort and silence in her mind. The problem is not ignorance. The problem is that food has become her main emotional anesthetic. This is what emotional eating looks like from within. In the first seconds, the person may not even realize what they feel. There is just discomfort, restlessness, emptiness, loneliness, or vague anxiety. The brain quickly offers a familiar solution: food. It is available, fast, predictable. The person eats, and for a short while tension decreases. But then guilt appears. Again I did this. I have no discipline. This guilt does not help, it only deepens stress and lowers self-esteem, making the next episode of emotional eating even more likely. The cycle closes. Now imagine another story. Mark, 42 years old, grew up in a family where any leftover food was seen almost as a sin. People are starving, and you are going to throw that away, his parents would say. He learned to clean his plate, no matter how full he was. At the same time, in his family, it was not customary to talk about feelings. If Mark was sad, he was offered a treat. If he was upset, someone might say, "Come on, don't cry. Let's have some cake." As an adult, he carries two powerful programs inside: finish the plate and calm emotions with food. Intellectually, he understands that he is eating more than his body needs. Emotionally, he feels almost guilty if food remains on the plate, and almost deprived if he tries to comfort himself without something tasty. These examples show how deeply our food patterns can be connected with our upbringing. Excess weight is not laziness. It is often a collection of deeply rooted habits that once helped us survive emotionally. Another important area is self-esteem. Suppose we have a woman named Laura, 28 years old. From teenage years she heard comments about her appearance, from classmates, relatives, sometimes even from parents. She began to believe that her body is something wrong, that she must constantly prove her worth. She periodically goes on strict diets, almost no carbohydrates, intense workouts, constant control. For a short time the weight goes down, but the pressure she puts on herself is enormous. She lives in internal war with her body. Eventually, she cannot bear it, breaks down, starts overeating, and the weight returns. Sometimes even more than before. Each failure further confirms the thought: there is something wrong with me. This is not just a story about food, but about identity and self-acceptance. If we look closely, we see a common pattern in many people with excess weight: a harsh internal critic. This inner voice speaks in phrases like, "You will never manage this. Look at yourself. You are weak." After such internal dialogue, it is difficult to move calmly towards change. When we feel attacked from within, we unconsciously look for protection. And again we often find it in food. One of the key therapeutic steps is to learn to recognize what precedes overeating. For example, a simple but powerful practice. For 1 week, before eating anything, pause for 30 seconds and ask yourself two questions. Where do I feel hunger? In my stomach? In my chest? In my throat? In my head? And what am I feeling emotionally right now? Many people are surprised to notice that their hunger often lives not in the stomach, but in the chest, as heaviness, loneliness, resentment. At such moments the body may not need food at all. It needs care, rest, or an honest conversation. Another useful exercise is the emotional diary. After each episode of overeating, instead of simply scolding yourself, you write down what happened before, what you were thinking, what you were feeling, what exactly you ate, and how you felt afterward. Over time, patterns become visible. For example, someone realizes that they always overeat after conversations with a particular relative, after checking work email late at night, or after scrolling social networks and comparing themselves to others. Recognizing the pattern is not about blaming circumstances, it is about seeing where we actually feel vulnerable. There is also the phenomenon of hidden benefits of excess weight. It is not obvious, and it may even sound offensive, but it is very important. For some people, weight protects them from unwanted attention. For example, a woman who experienced sexual harassment in adolescence may unconsciously feel safer when her body is less noticeable. For others, weight supports a certain role in the family. The one who eats with everyone, the one who bakes and feeds, the big strong guy. Losing weight in such cases means losing part of identity or changing the dynamics with loved ones. The psyche is afraid of this change, even if consciously a person says, "I want to be slim." In therapy, we often gently explore the questions. What might I lose if I lose weight? And what will change in my life and relationships if my body becomes different? Honest answers sometimes bring much more clarity than any diet. From a practical standpoint, psychological work with excess weight often goes in several directions at once. First, we learn to separate physical hunger from emotional. This does not happen in one day, it is a training. Second, we gradually expand the set of ways to cope with emotions. Movement, creative activities, conversations, breathing practices, short pauses during the day. Third, we soften the internal dialogue. Instead of "I am disgusting," "I have no willpower," the task is to develop a different language. "I am learning," "I had a difficult day," "No wonder I wanted comfort." This is not a failure. It is information about where I still need support. There is a simple test phrase I often offer to patients. Would you talk this way to a close friend who is struggling? If the answer is no, then you should not talk that way to yourself either. It is also important to understand that sudden strict restrictions rarely lead to stable results. The body responds to extreme diets as to a threat. It slows down metabolism, increases cravings, and after the diet ends, strives to restore reserves. From a psychological perspective, strict prohibitions strengthen the feeling of deprivation. A person constantly thinks about what is forbidden, and the forbidden becomes even more attractive. Much more effective is a gradual change in habits, step by step. Add more fiber and protein. Slightly reduce portion size. Introduce one new useful ritual every week. The psyche tolerates small changes much better than radical revolutions. Let us look at another example. Daniel, 39 years old, works in an office and often eats on the go. He is not used to having breakfast, drinks coffee on an empty stomach, and by evening comes home completely exhausted. In the evening, his main pleasure is a large dinner and snacks in front of the TV. If we simply say to him, "Just eat less in the evening," this will sound like a punishment. But if we start by adding breakfast, a more satisfying lunch, and to short breaks during the day, the amount of evening overeating may gradually decrease by itself. Here we are not taking away comfort, but redistributing care throughout the day. Sometimes people are afraid. If I start treating myself more kindly, I will relax completely and gain even more weight. Only strictness keeps me in shape. In practice, the opposite usually happens. When a person stops mentally beating themselves up, they have more energy for conscious choices. Guilt and shame paralyze respect towards oneself mobilizes. It is also worth mentioning that excess weight may be connected with real medical conditions, hormonal imbalances, metabolic disorders, side effects of medication. Therefore, an examination by a doctor is important, especially if weight changes sharply or seems disproportionate to the amount of food eaten. Psychological work does not replace medical diagnostics. Instead, it complements it, helping a person live in greater harmony with their body. In conclusion, I want to emphasize, excess weight is not a sentence and not a measure of your value as a person. It is a complex phenomenon that reflects both physical and emotional history. Approaching it only with diets is like trying to repair the roof, while ignoring cracks in the foundation. When we begin to listen to our feelings, notice our habits without condemnation, ask ourselves honest questions and give ourselves more humane support, the relationship with food changes. The body gradually stops being a battlefield and becomes a partner. And when mind and body are on the same side, the process of change may be slower than in aggressive diets, but it becomes deeper, more stable, and much more respectful to who you are. This text is not a substitute for personal consultation. If you feel that your relationship with food causes you suffering, you have episodes of uncontrollable overeating, or weight strongly affects your mood and life, it is reasonable and courageous to ask for help from a psychologist, psychiatrist, or physician. You do not have to go through this alone. Excess weight can also be closely connected to the social environment and culture a person lives in. Imagine someone working in an office where every small celebration means cakes, pastries, and sweet drinks. Refusing food is seen almost as an insult. Come on, it's just a piece of cake. Don't be so dramatic. Live a little. In such an atmosphere, food is not just nutrition, it is a social glue. Saying no feels like breaking away from the group. Over time, a person may begin to associate connection, acceptance, and belonging with eating together, even when they are no longer hungry. In that case, excess weight becomes the physical side effect of a very human need to be part of the group. Another modern factor is chronic sleep deprivation and fatigue. When a person sleeps poorly, several processes change at once. Hormones that regulate hunger and satiety become imbalanced. Cravings for high-calorie foods increase, and the brain becomes less capable of making thoughtful decisions. It is much harder to choose a balanced meal when you are exhausted, irritated, and your body is desperately asking for quick energy. Many people blame themselves for weakness in such moments, not realizing that their nervous system is simply trying to survive a constant lack of rest. Each night of insufficient sleep shifts the internal balance slightly in favor of overeating. Perfectionism also plays an important and often underestimated role. A perfectionist tends to set extremely high standards for themselves. If I start a diet, I must follow it perfectly. If I skip a workout once, then everything is ruined. If I cannot do it 100%, there is no point at all. This all or nothing thinking leads to frequent breakdowns. One small deviation from the plan is perceived as a total failure, and the person may think, I already ruined everything today, I might as well eat whatever I want, and then promise to start over tomorrow. This psychological trap can keep a person stuck for years between extremes: strict control and loss of control. The problem is not lack of desire, but the rigidity of internal rules. Sometimes excess weight is connected to unresolved trauma or long-term emotional pain. For example, a person who grew up in a tense, unsafe environment may have developed the habit of numbing their feelings in order to survive. Food can become one of the numbing tools. It slightly blurs sharp emotions, distracts from painful memories, and creates a kind of protective layer, both literally and symbolically. In such cases, the work is not about taking away food, but about gradually giving a person safer ways to cope with pain, so that food is no longer the only method available. There is also the experience of loneliness. A person can be surrounded by people and still feel deeply alone. In the evenings, when the day's noise fades, this loneliness becomes more noticeable. Food at such times is not just taste, it is a companion. The routine of making tea, taking a snack, sitting in front of the screen can feel like a ritual that fills the emptiness. Taking away this ritual without offering anything in return leaves a void. That is why psychological work sometimes starts not with food itself, but with helping a person build more fulfilling connections with others and with themselves. Technologies and the digital environment also play a role. Constant stimulation from screens, endless news feeds, and the habit of eating while distracted reduce the ability to sense satiety. When someone eats with full attention on the taste, smell, and sensations in the body, the brain receives a clear signal, enough. But when meals are combined with scrolling, working, or watching videos, that signal often gets lost. As a result, a person may consistently eat more than they need, simply because they are not fully present in the process. Another subtle but important reason is the loss of connection with the body. Some people largely live in their head. They think a lot, plan, analyze, worry, but rarely tune into physical sensations. Hunger, fullness, tension, fatigue. All of these signals become background noise. A person eats according to external rules. It's time. Everyone else is eating. I should finish this, rather than internal needs. In such a state, it is very easy to slide into overeating or irregular eating. and the body reflects this by slowly gaining weight. Restoring simple skills like asking, "What does my body feel right now?" can seem primitive, but in fact, it is a deep therapeutic step. Learned helplessness is another pattern that often appears in the stories of people who struggle with weight. After multiple unsuccessful attempts, repeated diets, and returns to the old weight, a person begins to believe that nothing will ever work. "I am hopeless. My body is just like this. I don't see the point in trying anymore." From this position, any new effort seems meaningless even before it begins. The past experience of failure becomes heavier than any actual kilogram. Working with learned helplessness is about finding small, realistic changes that bring visible results, not necessarily on the scale, but in well-being, energy, mood. Gradually, each small success weakens the belief that nothing ever works. All of these reasons show one important thing. Excess weight is not a single mistake that needs to be fixed, but a complex story that deserves careful understanding. When we treat ourselves only as a problem to be solved, we unconsciously continue patterns of harshness that often contributed to the issue in the first place. When we begin to view ourselves as a living, complex system in which every emotion, habit, and experience has meaning, the work with weight changes in quality. From a clinical and psychological perspective, a more effective approach looks like this. A person understands that food is not the enemy, it is a part of life that simply took on too many functions: comfort, reward, protection, company, distraction. The task is not to entirely remove these functions, but to gradually redistribute them. Comfort can be found in rest, hobbies, conversations. Reward can come from progress in skills, movement, creativity. Protection can come from clear boundaries and the ability to say no. Company can be sought in real or online communities where there is support, not pressure. Distraction can be replaced by activities that truly nourish the inner world, not just occupy time. This process is not quick. It often involves steps forward and back, days of clarity and days of confusion. But just as excess weight rarely appears suddenly, true change also builds gradually. The important thing is not perfection but direction. Even small choices, repeated over time, rewire the relationship with food and with the body. As a narrator speaking from the position of a physician, I want to emphasize, if you recognize yourself in any of these examples, it does not mean that something is fundamentally wrong with you. It means that your current strategies for coping with life's difficulties have side effects, and your body is honestly showing those effects. You are not broken, you are adapting, perhaps in ways that no longer serve you well. Completing this article, I will say the main thing. Dealing with excess weight at the psychological level is not about forcing yourself into a narrow ideal. It is about building a more respectful, attentive relationship with your own body and inner world. It is about learning to see hunger, satiety, fatigue, and emotions as signals, not as enemies. It is about shifting from "I must fight myself" to "I want to support myself." You do not have to unravel this alone. A competent psychologist, psychiatrist, or physician can help you understand the emotional roots of your eating behavior, choose safe strategies for change, and support you when it becomes difficult. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign that you are ready to take your health, physical and psychological, seriously. Your body is not your opponent. It is your lifelong companion. And when you begin to listen to it, protect it, and cooperate with it, excess weight turns from a source of shame into a starting point for a deeper, kinder transformation of your whole life.